in action. So as part of that project for the next 3 years, we'll be working with 11 projects across Australia from as far north as Normanton, and that group will be presenting tomorrow. It's an Indigenous First Nations group at Delta Downs. The other Queensland project, and I'm a Queenslander, so I'm very glad there's 2 Queensland projects, is Ant's project, who we're about to speak about, which is around IPM in capsicums. We've got projects over in Western Australia, we've got projects in New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, and hopefully South Australia. So look, it's going to be a great program of work. Ant is our first speaker around that program of work, talking about some of his work today. So Ant's an IPM specialist, that's integrated pest management. Hopefully most of you know what that means. So he's tackling today one of our toughest questions in agriculture. Are we too reliant on pesticides? Okay, it's a really... I'm glad Bruce is here. This is a question that confronts us in agriculture a lot. I worked in the cotton industry for a while. It's a big question still in that industry, across a lot of our industries. So look, Ant is going to argue, and I think the argument will be well received in this room, that change is urgent. So it is urgent, and we need to understand that so we can support it. So look, I'd like you all to welcome Anthony Rice from Granite Belt IPM to talk through the next session. Thanks, Ant.
Well, thanks to Landcare for the opportunity to come and speak today. I feel very privileged to be able to be here. How about that? A bit? No, that'll do. Is that a bit better? Yeah. So thanks for the opportunity to come and speak today. Before I get too much into the solutions, I just want to set the scene a little bit about how we've got to where we are now with our reliance on insecticides. So prior to World War II, we relied largely on some heavy metals, things like arsenic and mercury, as well as some other botanicals like neem and pyrethrum sorts of sprays. But during the Second World War, during our research into chemicals that would kill us, we also realised how deadly they were to insects as well. And that we widely recognised how valuable things like the organochlorines, carbamates and organophosphates could be to agriculture. And what I've also done here is I've put parallels in these purple balloons. They're the stages of addiction, of human addictions, people's addiction, and it might seem a little bit gimmicky, but hopefully by the end of the presentation you'll notice that there are some real parallels in our reliance on insecticides. So we realised these insecticides were very, very effective, which led to increased reliance, which then of course led to what they called at the time the chemical crisis, whereby more and more chemicals were required to do the same job, and that was largely due to the development of resistance. Interestingly, only about 0.5% of insects are considered pests, so the 99.5% of the fallout of insect species that we kill with our insecticides are beneficials, pollinators, or they carry out some other ecological service. In 1962, people familiar with this book, Rachel Carson's Silent Spring? Yeah, it's a ripper. She released this in 1962, and where she documented the environmental harm caused by the misuse of insecticides. What people don't often realise that at the same time, about 6 months later after this was published, the chemical giant Monsanto published what was essentially a rebuttal of that publication, where they talked about a village that had no insecticides, and they actually made a point. So yeah, check it out, have a look. This led to this dichotomy of the environmental camp and the chemical camp, and we've sort of drawn lines in the sand and poked chests and things, but it hasn't given us the answer that we need even now. So IPM sort of sits there in the middle of those arguments. So there was a concerted effort to bring it into mainstream production systems in the 70s. That's when the term first became very popular, and it aimed to make agriculture more sustainable. Yet 6 decades later, 90%, it's actually over 90% of plant health programs rely on chemical insecticides. Jump forward 30 years, and those world scientists released their manifesto on a warning to humanity on things like climate change, overpopulation, resource depletion, and those sorts of things. Interestingly, that was the same year that this product, Confidor, came on the market. It was the first of the neonicotines that we had seen. The active ingredient in Confidor is imidacloprid, and the thing that's important about the neonicotines is that I'm going to pick on them a little bit today, is that they are systemic, so they're taken up by the plant, and for at least a short while, every part of that plant can then become toxic. So it can be the roots, the stem, the leaves, it can be the nectar, and it can be the pollen. They're also effective insecticides at extremely low levels, and this has been an issue for us because even testing for these things has become difficult. They are so much more toxic than things like DDT that our testing and the way we use these things hasn't kept up. They're also highly water soluble and persistent in the soil. If we jump forward to 2020, almost another 30 years, scientists released an additional manifesto, a warning to humanity on insect extinctions, and here they documented the potential harm that could be coming to us if we're not more careful with our invertebrate biodiversity. At the same time, the neonicotine imidacloprid is now the world's most commonly used insecticide, and it's used mostly for seed treatments, and it's the most popular by a considerable margin. So what is this insect apocalypse that people talk about? Well, the Science Journal published a paper in 2014 where they said that 40%, there'd been about a 45% decline in insect biodiversity and abundance over the last 40 years. If you get online, there's so much material here that I could have taken out and used. This is not cherry-picked, this is just the first ones I picked. So estimates vary, it's not happening evenly. Some estimates are as high as 90%, but flying in the face of all that in this blue box is a paper came out in 2020 that was highlighted in the conversation. I'm speaking quickly because I'm going to run out of time if I don't. But it was one of the things that brought us to our attention, and this was a long-term study over many, many sites, and they found no net decline of invertebrate biodiversity. So that's saying that it's not too late, there's still hope, we can still do something about it, and we'll get on to a bit more about what we can do about it soon. So with this insect decline and the studies that have come out, most of the work has been done in Europe. There's a very long history of entomology in Europe, so there's a lot of long-term studies that document this decline. The problem we have here in Australia is that we've got almost none of this long-term data. And the other thing that this map really points out is the lack of data we're getting out of the tropical regions of the world where 80 to 90% of insect biodiversities occur. So we flying a little bit in the dark, but one of the questions I often get asked when I tell people what I do, they ask about the Christmas beetles. The other thing people often talk about is the lack of bugs on your windscreen. They don't have to wash their windscreen anymore. It's an anecdotal reflection on what we all sort of feel is happening. So Invertebrates Australia have Australia's Threatened 1000 list, where there's about 1,000 invertebrates, and these include marine invertebrates as well. They consider threatened. Up to about 150 species, and this is through a mathematical modelling of declines that we're actually noticing, but extrapolating that into the areas where we're not knowing and we don't know about these insects because we haven't even identified them yet. The modelling suggests about 150 species of invertebrates are being lost in Australia every year, and there's also a series of butterflies that are considered under threat. So we've gone from organochlorines to organophosphates, and now we're on to neonicotines. And the finger of blame is being pointed at our loss of biodiversity, invertebrate biodiversity. More and more is being pointed at these. the US and the UK show that the declines in bees and butterflies in those countries can be directly attributed to neonicotine-treated seeds. Now, the problem with neonicotine-treated seeds, and I will talk about this a bit more in a minute, is that while neonicotines will break down relatively quickly if they're in sunlight, if you put them into the soil, they're not exposed to sunlight, and they just don't break down nearly as quickly. So imidacloprid is over 1,000 times more toxic to bees than DDT. It's still a thing that we can't seem to get our head around how dangerous they are. So why should we care? So if you have a close look at insects, if you're not blown away by the sheer beauty of them, I certainly am, then the perfection of form and function can take your breath away. They are just amazingly built organisms designed to do exactly what they're supposed to be doing. There's roughly 60,000 vertebrate species in the world. There's over 30 million species of invertebrates. That's roughly 500 to 1. The class Insecta outnumber all other animals on Earth. And I can just blithely say that their ecosystem services are things like nutrient cycling, pest control, pollination and decomposition. They're also the main diet for numerous birds, bats, lizards, frogs and fish. I cannot stand up here and overestimate their importance to us. Without insects, ecosystems collapse and our food web will no longer support us. Rachel Carson said, and I'll paraphrase her a little bit here, a war on insects is a war on ourselves. So jump forward to 2025. I should have my glasses on. The state of play at the moment is in Europe, 3 of the neonicotines have been banned since 2018 for outside field use. Although they're banned for use in Europe, they can still manufacture and export them, and Greenpeace estimates that they exported about 13,000 tonnes in 2021, I think it says. In the US, they've been implicated in colony collapse disorder of bees, and about 85% of honey has been found to have at least one neonicotine in it. 75% of honey, this is globally, has at least 2, and 10% has 4 or 5. In Australia, we have 6 neonicotines now registered for use. And the APVMA is the Australian Pesticide and Veterinary Medicine Authority, that's our governing body, is currently reviewing their registration for neonicotine. So I'd really recommend you get on the website, have a look at the review, and when comments are available, it gives us a chance to respond to their decisions. In the UK, the Environmental Department in the UK has stated really openly that because a chemical passed a battery of tests in the laboratory or in the field trials, it doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to be benign if it's used at industrial scales, and that's what we're doing. We're using them on industrial scales. So this is a photograph I took in the Darling Downs, southeast Queensland, where they grow sunflowers and maize and a few other things. But the conservation value of remnant vegetation is only now just being recognised. Just a couple of things to keep in mind over the next couple of slides is that there is enough insecticide in a single neonicotine-treated seed to kill 133,000 bees. Now, we talked about some of the C words earlier today, and I can corroborate all of this. This is not just stuff I've made up. I'm a scientist, that's what I do. So if anyone has any questions about this, I don't know if we're going to have time for questions afterwards, please come and find me. I'm happy to hand out the references to corroborate what I'm saying. There is no legal requirement in Australia to label neonicotine-treated seeds, and so if you go and buy them, you have to specifically ask for them. It's become so insidious in the way we are doing things, and I'll show you soon that it's absolutely unnecessary. So if you take some, on an average planting, you take neonicotine-treated maize seed, for example, they call it corn in the US, and you plant that out the recommended rate, you are putting 52 grams, I can't see this slide, I can see it up there, 52 grams of neonicotines into your soil. The plant uptake is abysmally low. It's less than 2% of that chemical gets taken up by the maize and used. So you've still got 50 grams, which is 98%, over 98% of it goes directly into your soil where it won't break down. So if it rains, where's it going to go? It's going to go straight into your waterways and can potentially be taken up by all the riparian vegetation that's there. So the very refuges of remnant vegetations that we're starting to value could themselves be toxic. We still haven't even, science still hasn't got a figure on what the effects are on other things other than bees. It's mostly bees where the work has been done. We don't know about long-term chronic exposure to our native insects. So the very things that we're trying to value, if we're not really careful, could become toxic. So you might just say, well, this is just a cost of doing business. Well, actually, it's not. When we've bothered to actually really look, the evidence is really clear. It's unequivocal. We don't need them. The studies that I'm quoting up there are not small studies. They are dozens of trials over several years. And every time we've looked to see if we need neonicotine-treated seeds, it's come up that we haven't. In the early 90s, roughly 50% of corn in the US was treated with an insecticide. By 2011, it's 100%, and yet there's no tangible increase in pest pressure. It just seems that we are addicted to these things, and addiction is an inability to stop doing or using something harmful. So we have to ask ourselves, why are we doing this? So this is where we're at the moment, and now I'm going to talk a little bit about IPM and getting ourselves off the insecticide treadmill. Before I go any further, I want to introduce this army of beneficial insects. They are mostly native. In fact, I think they're just about all native. They are really, really common. They're common in your garden. They are common in your crop. They're common in waterways. And all they want to do is eat your pests. You give them a chance, they'll do it. All we have to do is not kill them. Often that's not enough. In a commercial setting, you've got to be sure, so there won't be other steps you'll take. But one of the things about these guys is they can survive fairly well on just nectar and pollen from plants. So integrated pest management is a management system that uses a range of techniques to suppress pest populations below economic thresholds, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. The whole program should be based on really comprehensive population data. This is what I do. I'm a pest scout, so I provide these to growers that I'm working with. But the data should be comprehensive on both the pest population and also the natural enemies that you've got in there. One of the barriers to uptake of IPM is that over the years we've overcomplicated it. I really believe that we have overcomplicated it. So someone who's really good at farming all of a sudden has to take on all these other understandings, all this other knowledge that they, it's hard work. So I believe this blue box here is how the hierarchical process of IPM traditionally works. And we really should be aspiring to this. This can really help, but those first steps, it's really important that we don't see this complicated program as an impediment to uptake. So I reckon there's about 8 steps that we can take if you have a farm and you use insecticides regularly, that we can take to start harnessing that background control that those natural enemies are giving us. Now, they're giving us this control whether we see it, whether we see them or not. The only time you notice it, and the only time you actually become really aware of how much good they're doing, is when you go out there with a broad spectrum insecticide and kill them, and all of a sudden your pests are going nuts. So the first thing, we know that what I think of imidacloprid and the neonicotine seed treatments, they are not compatible with IPM for lots of reasons, but probably the main one is that we use them in all cases as seed treatments. It's used against a pest problem that does not exist. It might exist, it might come to pass, but we're still treating it with all the disadvantages that it could be environmentally unfriendly. We're still treating it with a possibility that it might be beneficial. The next big thing we can do is go out to the chemical shed and rearrange all your insecticides by the IRAC functional group, resistance mode of action group number that's printed on all the insecticides, and you would arrange them as high down to low, and you superimpose the lifespan of your crop over that. So when you're very early in the crop cycle, you tend to use the ones with the higher numbers, and the reason you would do that is that those higher numbers tend to be newer and they tend to be more specifically targeted at the pest and less damaging to your beneficial. So you've got that double-edged sword where, yes, you can spray your pest, but you also still get that background control to get the survivors. If you want to know more about it, there's this document down here, a guide to pesticide effect on beneficials. It's an absolute ripper. It's a really good start. It's only relatively new, and it's an incredibly useful tool. So how are we going for time? Let's begin.
Another 3 minutes and then questions.
Woo! No way. Talk to your pest scout. Step 3, talk to your pest scout. They will be the person that helps manage the risk, whether you see that change as that risk is real or it's just perceived. Start working with pest thresholds in a pest management system that's not dominated by chemical interventions. A little bit of your pest in your crop is a good thing. Here's another C word, coverage is king. If you don't get that coverage, and these two examples here, I reckon they're spraying at maybe 50 to 60% efficiency. It looks really good. You cannot tell a grower he's not getting coverage, but I've seen it go right through it. But within a week, the pest has stood up again and you've got to go back and spray. I know it seems counterintuitive to what I'm saying here today, but if you're going to spray, spray really well. Identify the top few pests in your crop and start with them. Don't let the complexity of all this get overwhelming. Farm biosecurity. Try not to get the pest in the first place, but also within farms really important. Things like mites can be spread around on your clothing and on workers. So try not to, if you've got an issue there, work on that block last. Value your interrows. Interrows could be an amazing resource. You see the one up, is that a pointer? Yeah. This one up here. Biologically sterile, looks really neat, but you're down here, you've got pollen and nectar and refuges, so if you do have to come and spray the crop, you've still got that opportunity there for your natural enemies to reinvade. So what can you do if you don't have a farm? What can you do, what can we all do to help produce an environment that's more friendly to our insects? If we live in urban areas, urbanisation is a key driver to insect decline. So this will really help us ameliorate that if we can start producing something that's a lot more friendly to insects. First of all, plant flowers. Plant flowers, plant flowers. They should be first 3 or 4. They will provide, it's not just the pollinators we're worried about here, it's all those other insects that rely on that nectar and that pollen and that mating site to exist. Really careful though, because in Australia, the nursery trade has a permit in place to use neonicotines as a soil trench in those flowers. It's an appalling misuse of insecticides. Every time I buy something, I'll ask the nursery, is this treated? And if I have to go to the wholesale nursery, I'll go to that. I'm also going to Green Life Industries Australia. It's not okay. It doesn't have to be labelled, and you can put this in your garden and it can produce toxic pollen and nectar for years. It can move into the soil to the adjacent ones. We need to be all aware of this. There's no requirement for labelling. It's appalling. 1 minute. Eek. Watch your lights. Garden looks good on the left, but it's biologically sterile. Try and turn some parts of your garden into a more natural environment. Tread really carefully with insecticides. Again, where have all the Christmas beetles gone? You can buy this stuff off the shelf at your local hardware stores and you have no idea where it's ending up. Leave the leaves. Compost is the stuff of life, we all know that, but there's also that habitat it provides for invertebrates. Be wary of flea treatments in dogs. It can have enough neonicotine to kill 50 million bees. take pride in your own Kent garden, be an ambassador. So when people say, hey, your garden looks like a dump. Yeah, yes, but look at all my bugs. So start engaging with people. You'll love it. Carbon footprint over the top of all of these drivers. Climate change is exacerbating it all. And the last couple of things, as I said, get involved with the APVMA and their regulatory decisions coming, and buy imperfect fruit. Go into the supermarket, buy the ones that they specifically make, because that takes pressure off the growers to keep spraying for cosmetic damage on what is otherwise perfectly good fruit. And remember, time's fun when you're having flies. Thank you.
Good on you. Thanks, Anne. That was great. I reckon that's probably the easiest action you've all got at the end of this conference. Take pride in your unkempt garden. All right, question over here.
Thank you for a wonderful, inspirational and middle-of-the-road approach to these things as well. We live in a modern world with lots of complexities. Just to quickly mention, I'm Bruce Maynard. I won the 2022 Bob Hawke Award. During that little acceptance speech, I mentioned the fact that passive chemical exposures are affecting all of us. In the 3 years since my travels across Australia, I can only report it is rapidly getting worse. In agricultural regions, when you go to the pastoral regions surrounding our ag regions, you see the vegetation damage recede. So unfortunately, there is no refuge anymore, nor a possibility for us to plant our way out of it. So my question to you is that rather than question, so I encourage you, thank you very much for your wonderful explanation. We all have a lot of work to do, and unfortunately this is a threat to every land care effort we do. I can speak personally that we've lost more than 100,000 trees off our place and more than 250,000 shrubs due to passive chemical exposures. So therefore all of that cannot support insects anymore. So thank you very much again.
We've got a question up the back from a junior land carer, I think. Might pass the mic down.
If pesticides are such a big problem, why don't we just ban them?
That's actually a really good question. I would like to. The reason is I think we've still got to find that balance between food security and productivity and keeping farms economically viable. So pesticides aren't all bad. Some of them are worse than others. So if you were to, and again it's about IPM, only using insecticides as a very last resort. And I still think we need it. I don't think we've come down the path far enough to say we don't need insecticides at all yet. But it's a good question, and if I could, I probably would start going down that path. When I'm king of the world, you come and see me.
All right. Sorry, guys, this is the last question.
I'd just like to hear your thoughts on dung beetles.
Dung beetles. You mean the effect of insecticides on dung beetles?
Partly that, but also how to protect them from drenches and the like.
Dung beetles, actually, we're really lucky. We've got lots and lots of dung beetles at our farm. I'm starting to think about farming them. But I think there are some things you can do. I worry because in the Granite Belt during winter, during summer, we feed our cattle sulphur to help with the buffalo fly. And I worry that that could be impacting on dung beetles. It doesn't seem to be. I don't know. I know our chooks like them, so we try and keep them at the paddock. But yeah, as far as that goes, I think there are impacts of some worming products that people use for worming their cattle. I don't have a direct answer for you, but if you want to get hold of me, I can certainly look it up for you and find someone who does. Done. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much, Ant. That was super inspirational. I hope you all found it that way. Also, super alarming. Bit of both, wasn't it? Interestingly, my first job out of uni in the olden days was the Development Extension Officer for IPM like 30 years ago. I wish I'd known Ant back then. I even took it down. I've got a lady beetle on my arm because they are the most beautiful and most ferocious little natural predator, or one of them, of course. But what a great talk, and let's just take this away with us and understand it's all about balance. I was lucky enough to work for a couple of good agronomists in the cotton industry 30 years ago, and our check sheet as an insect scout was we had to list the pest insects and the beneficial insects and look at the balance of them before spray decisions were made. So that was 30 years ago. We need more of that now. We need less insecticides being used. I was involved in a project where on a grain crop on the Darling Downs we had, it was chlorpyrifos. It was a horrible chemical. I think it's still used. But it was sprayed on half of the crop. We had Heliothis was the pest, and the other half of the crop was not sprayed. The insect burden, the pest insect burden was huge on the side that we sprayed with the chlorpyrifos. The unsprayed side had a lovely wasp. It was a trichogramma. I think it's a very voracious beneficial insect. And the trichogramma wasp, who's a parasitic wasp, basically took out all the Heliothis. But because when we killed off the trichogramma, they weren't there to battle with the Heliothis. And one of the key problems we do have, and I might get the species wrong and Ant will pull me up, but of the noctuid moths, Heliothis is the key, pest insect that we struggle with. We've also got a great success story in Australia around Cactoblastis, which is also a noctuid moth, which is still what tends to keep prickly pear under control. And introduced species, prickly pear, got out of hand in a lot of areas, impacted our landscape. Then a noctuid moth called Cactoblastis came in and it keeps it under control still. So if we want to bring in a beneficial insect to battle with Heliothis, which is a noctuid, we also have to make sure it doesn't battle with the Cactoblastis, which is still keeping prickly pear under control. So it's quite complicated, isn't it, Ant? You know, this IPM thing. So look, thank you everyone. I just wanted to say that on the Landcare Ag website, I'm going to ask all of our really cool presenters over the next 2 days whether they're happy to give me their presentations. I'll JPEG them and I'll put them up on the Landcare Ag website, okay? So please, it'll be there. Or contact me, you'll be able to find me and just say, hey, can you send me Ant's preso? I'm sure Ant will be happy to share the word. So thank you everyone. Go for lunch and I'll see you back afterwards.